Konnichiwa, hola, assalamu alaikum, namaste, and hello. I'm NKsir and welcome to my new session. In my previous session, I had discussed about the chapter The Gardener written by P. Lankesh. And in this session, I'm going to discuss yet another topic. Before I begin my class, let me ask you a question. Did you know that there are 195 nations in our world? And out of 195 nations, 193 are recognized by United Nations. Now, why am I talking about 193 or 195 nations? And why did I say hello in 5 different languages? Because as we travel from place to place, from country to country, people differ, their customs differ, culture, mannerism, language, food, everything differs. If you can see at the back, there are a lot of signs how two people are greeting each other. I'm going to discuss about the chapter Japan and Brazil through a traveler's eye, written by George Mikes. George Mikes is Hungarian author, is an artist, journalist, illustrator. So this chapter is basically considered a travelogue. In case you don't know what is a travelogue is a piece of information or a record which is composed or recorded by a traveler when he visits a foreign country. In this case, George Mikes has recorded his own experience of visiting Japan and Brazil. So let us discuss the chapter Japan and Brazil through a traveler's eye. So first thing, if you observe, he talks about Japanese manners. If you are in Japan, Japanese make you feel you are among the exquisitely well-mannered people. Japanese people are so well behaved. That is what he meant to say. And not just that, he observes a lot of the things and he says there are red telephone booths hanging around. The telephone booth could be kept on a table. It could be kept on a counter in a restaurant or a hotel. And people in Japan, they converse anything and everything over the telephone without having any problem of privacy. And George Mikes says that courtesy has double function. How do Japanese people respect others and respect their privacy? He says courtesy has double function. One is courtesy itself and the privacy. He says any person who is standing on a street holding the receiver talking to his family member, or it could be his employee, or it could be any confidential matter, he need not hesitate if somebody would stand next to him or stand by him and listen to his conversation. Now, Japanese people are so well behaved that they make you feel the phone receiver is your castle. So when you are at home and nobody is around, you don't hesitate to speak loudly. If you are talking to your friend about something fishy or about some secrets or about some other stuffs which you don't want other people to listen, you don't hesitate to speak out loud when nobody is around. But how would you mend yourself when you are walking on a footpath and you know that there are a lot of people standing next to you and you have to talk to any important person? You cannot scream, you cannot yell, you cannot discuss something important. But in Japan, people don't make you feel that way. They give you absolute privacy. Now, immediately, George Mike observes mania for bowing. So what is this mania for bowing? So bowing is referred as more formal, more oriental. It is also infectious. He says it is more formal, more oriental. Oriental refers to anything which is related to Asian countries, and more infectious. He says more infectious, also infectious. Why is it infectious? George Mikes has a keen observation and he has observed people bowing at each other. Now this is funny. We don't greet each other in India by doing this. We don't bow. We either join our hands and say namaste, or we shake hands, or we say hello. But in Japan, they bow at each other. So as people meet another person or other people, they have to bow. How long can you bow? Maybe once or twice or thrice. And he says infectious. Because after a few hours, you start bowing to yourself. You tend to bow at everybody you see, and when you see nobody around, you automatically start bowing to yourself. So that's how you get yourself addicted to bowing. And how to bow? You cannot bend or bow too deep. You cannot bend just 10 degrees or 80 degrees. No. And there is certain criteria who has to bow to whom and in what degree you have to bow to other person. So how do you decide that you have to bow at other person with what degree? It depends on their profession. He says you bow to the wrong man at the wrong time. So there is a particular time as well, and there is a particular profession you need to know, and cannot clasp hands in front of you. You cannot join your hands like this or hold your hands like this and bow to people you meet, because it is a wrong sign. And he says you clasp hands in front of you, which is bad, or you do which is worse. It could be bad or it could be even worse. Sounds funny? Yes, but that is the tradition in Japan. And it could be even in Taiwan, Thailand, and Korea, or in China as well. So let us move on. The next question is, who should bow to whom? If I am the president, if I am a local man, if I am an engineer, if I am a doctor, so how am I going to bow to the other professional? I am a teacher, so am I going to bow to my students? If I did, in what degree? Are my students going to bow back to me? If they do, in what degree? So much rules, but yet they do it without any difficulty. George Mike says everyone bows to everyone else, but they have a complicated hierarchy in bowing. I told you they have a complicated hierarchy, which is very difficult for an outsider to understand. Who bows to whom, how deeply, and for how long? Not just how deep or in what degree, it also depends for how long. You cannot keep bending the whole day. You cannot just bend in a fraction of a second and get up. It doesn't make sense to us, but it does make sense to Japanese people. If two Japanese bow, neither is to straighten up before the other stands erect in front of them. This is absolute mania. If two people are bending at each other, so when will the one person know that the other is going to straighten up? Don't know. It is very, very difficult for a foreigner, for an outsider, but they do it with so ease. Along with this example, George Mikes also gives an example of one of the American states which comes up with a rule. For instance, there are two cars which will meet at an intersection. One car is coming from this side and one car is going from this side, and they meet at an intersection. Now, how will the other car get to know that which has to pass first? And the American rule goes like this: neither has to move first as the other moves. Neither. Either this nor this. No, it doesn't make sense. Likewise, he says, how will the other Japanese person get to know that the opposite person will stand erect? It might be very difficult for us, but they do it with so ease. Mike's says, a little complicated to us, they manage it effortlessly. They do it without any effort at all. It is a split second that decides whether I am going to keep bending or I am going to stand erect. As he moves further, he says, even the smallest difference in rank, he says, the smallest difference. Let me give you an example. I am a teacher. Yes, I have 2 years experience of teaching, or let's say 10 years experience of teaching, and there is somebody who has just joined recently who has no experience at all. So that is the slightest difference. Both of us are teachers, but only difference is I have 10 years and he has no experience at all. So how long should that person bow to me? In what degree should he bow? So that is the aspect which decides of showing respect to the teacher who has 10 years experience. Standing, age, social position will certainly reflected in that split second. He says that social status, age, your profession, yes, and your position, your social position. Everything is decided in that bowing degree and in that split second. So complicated, but yet they do it with so ease. Now, in Japan, there are rules of bowing in family too. Yes, you heard me correct. There are rules to bow at each other amongst family members too. So there are basic rules in family as well. The wife bows to her husband, the child bows to his father, younger brothers to elder brothers, and the sister bows to all brothers of whatever age. And not just this, if you observe in the textbook, there is an image where a wife is bending and greeting her husband who is carrying her child in the saddle, which also bends. There is a reference in the textbook where George Mikes clearly indicates when the mother bends and respects or greets her husband, even the newborn baby or the child majestically bends and greets along with its mother. So that is the family rule. That's how Japanese people greet each other even in the family. Now, we saw how people behave and how people respect each other and give privacy to other people. We saw how people greet each other in the family. But what about in public places? There is a particular rule. And not just that, in Japan, people hire, or in multiplex or malls, there are girls who are hired just to bow to everybody. They just bow and greet every person without having any difference of rank, age, or social position. They greet everybody as soon as you enter the escalators. You can just refer this to the Indian context. If you visit a restaurant or a hotel, there will be a doorkeeper who greets you, joining his hands, wearing a turban with an Indian attire. This could be the best example of Indian context. But in Japan, they hire girls to greet each and everybody. To all and sundry, refer to each and everybody. And one more thing George Mikes observes is that when he entered Tokaido line between Tokyo and Osaka. What is this Tokaido line? So this is a railway line, and while he was traveling in the train, he observes two conductors entering the coach in a theatrical scene. They enter the coach, yes, they greet everybody. It seems like they are enacting something. They don't appear to be conductors like other train conductors. They appear to be somewhat theatrical artists. So that's how the perception was about the two conductors. And they start collecting or checking the tickets. And it seems, for George Mike, it seems like a theatrical scene. It seems as if he is an entertainer or one of the audience in a theater. And when he visited, George Mikes, when he visited Nara, again this is one of the places in Japan, when he visited Nara, he speaks about the mannerism of Japanese deer or deer. It is very particular to observe the words in the text when he talks about Japanese deer. So why is he particularly talking about a Japanese deer? He says that it seems as if even the deer has inherited the genes of Japanese people. Inherited since ages together. Why? Because George Mikes was handling, he had a food packet in his hand, and Japanese deer comes in front of him, stands and bows as if it had carried the genes from Japanese people. It stands straight again and plucks the food packet from George Mikes and jumps away. So look at the deer. It could be an animal not trained at all. Nobody has trained it. So George Mikes, maybe out of infatuation, he has told this. Or it could be possible that all the animals, everybody, every living creature in Japan might have inherited the genes, the genetical order of bowing to everybody. So that's how complicated it is in Japan. And there is one more scene which winds up and gives a complete detailed notes and clarification about Japanese mannerism. He not only praises them, he just winds up with a big punch. So what is that winding up punchline? He says, people bowing to each other with ceremonious serenity at bus stops. Yes, they do. They bow at each other with a big smile. They bow ceremoniously. But arrival of the buses changes people into savages. Now this is funny. Till now, they maintained distance. They bow at each other. But as soon as the bus arrives, how do Japanese people react? They forget all this mannerism of bowing and greeting each other. Instead, they elbow each other's chest, each other's tummy, because they want to get into the bus. Till now, whatever hype George Mikes gave about Japanese people has collapsed to the very basic ground. So that's about Japanese people mannerism. And one more topic about eating soup. This is even more funnier. Why? Because in Japan, eating soup has more dangers than almost anything else. Why does George refer that eating soup has more dangers than anything else? Let us see that. Because if you are in Japan while eating soup or drinking soup, if you don't make a fearful noise, it indicates that you are not appreciating the soup. You are not giving any compliments to the server. This is the basic rule. So there is a proverb which goes like this: when in Rome, do like Romans do. So obviously, when you are in Japan, you have to do the way Japanese do. So making a fearful noise is considered appreciation. It's a sign of appreciation. But can a foreigner do the same thing? Now, George Mikes says that it must be according to the expected levels of approval. You cannot just take a bowl of soup and just go on making a hell of a noise. No, it has to be at a certain degree, certain level. The sound should not be so irritating for the fellow Japanese or the fellow customer. But one more disaster for a foreigner is that it is thought to be an example of ill manners if a foreigner does it. If any of the foreigner does it, the waiter or the server might think, what an ill-mannered lout. So, George Mikes is explaining to the readers that he was stuck in a complicated situation. Being a foreigner, he cannot do it because Japanese server might think, what an ill-mannered European, ill-mannered lout. If he does it, people think, waiters think, ill-mannered lout. If he doesn't do it, it is a problem because the waiter might think that he is not appreciating my soup. Very complicated. He is giving a piece of information about Japanese mannerism. So next, he moves on to the topic of traffic in Brazil. So how is the traffic in Brazil? He says, nobody hurries in Brazil. Nobody. Even in the text, if you observe, the word nobody is in bold letter. It is in capital letter. Why he says nobody hurries in Brazil? It is the contradiction or contradictory, opposite of nobody. Let me explain it how and why. Author says, nobody hurries in Brazil. You could reach your destination an hour later, or maybe a day later, or maybe never. Yes, he says you could reach your destination in Brazil. If you are traveling by a car, you could reach your destination an hour late, a day late, or maybe you will never reach at all. He says people in Brazil have so much of leisure time, they take things so seriously. What is that? They especially take things seriously about decorating the footpath. Footpath, the pavements. This is the actual picture which is taken from an internet. This is how it looks in Brazil. They decorate the pavements using mosaics and tiles. And it looks so beautiful. They use different designs to decorate the pavement. And all of a sudden, When these people who have so much of leisure time to decorate the pavements, when they step on the wheel, when they get the steering wheel, when they step on the accelerator, which means when they get the vehicle, everything changes. The whole picture, the whole scenario changes. And George Mikes tells the reader that importing duties, custom duties are too much, too heavy, they are too high. And people still they import cars and vehicles as if they are given for free of cost to everybody. So till now, everything was going fine, and people who drive the vehicles, they tend to pick up speed. For every 10 seconds, they pick up a mile speed, which means they speed up drastically. And everything, the whole scenario is looking fine till now. But he says, as soon as the people or any person who gets a vehicle, he changes his attitude towards a pedestrian. George Mike says, now the life of pedestrian is at stake. It is in danger. He says, and don't think that the drivers will not take the pedestrians in a wrong way. And don't think that drivers are not purposefully creating problems at the pedestrians. Why does he say so? Because as soon as the pedestrians come onto the road, there is a whole different level of game. So what is this game? The drivers who are mending their work, if any driver looks at a pedestrian who is crossing a road, aims at the pedestrian, and he becomes his prey. He says, see here, bizarre impact, and the driver and pedestrian become hunter and prey. It's just like prey and predator. So who is the prey here? Prey is the pedestrian and the hunter or the predator is the driver. So you can imagine that the driver is going to chase away the pedestrian there. Why are they doing it? Maybe it's their way of living. Can we do it in India? Can you just imagine for a fraction of a second what would happen if you speed your vehicle at the walking pedestrian in India? There will be a complete traffic jam. Yes. And not just that, it is not the duty of a pedestrian to cross over the road in India. It is the duty of the vehicle driver to stop and allow the pedestrian to cross in India. But is it the case in Brazil? No. Here, it is vice versa. The driver aims at the pedestrian and he targets and he moves his vehicle as if he is going to dash or collide or kill that person right at that stage. So what should be the reaction of a pedestrian now? Remember, this is the condition or day-to-day scenario or scenes which happen in Brazil. So how should a pedestrian react to this scene? Will they fight? No, they will not. What they do is, the driver, when he aims at the pedestrian, and if pedestrian tries to escape, and he did, the pedestrian looks at the driver, gives a smile and says, today is yours, tomorrow is going to be mine. Which means, if I am walking today, maybe you will get a chance to walk tomorrow, and I am going to get my car and I am going to do the same thing what you did today. So that's the scenario. But don't ever do it in India, because this is going to be a complete scenario, right? Now, so how is the relationship between the drivers in Brazil? So what sort of a relation do they have? So there is a war between drivers themselves. Is more dangerous but good tempered. He says, war between drivers themselves is murderous but good-tempered. If you observe this, murderous but good-tempered. How could be the scene of murder gets to be good-tempered? Mike says that in an hour, other drivers will compel you, they will force you to commit mistake at least 20 times. Could you imagine it here? Could you imagine people doing or the drivers doing it in India or any other countries? They will just bring down the roof, they will bring down the sky on earth. But in Brazil, it is complete paradox, complete opposite. They force you, but still the driver looks at the other driver, smiles at him and says, okay, I did a mistake. You forced me to do a mistake. They force you to commit most heinous crimes, not just ordinary crimes, most heinous, horrible, 20 times every hour, but they still smile at you. You really need to have a cool nerve if you are going to drive in Brazil. There is no anger, no hostility, no mad hooting. Just close your eyes for a fraction of a second and think what would happen if you are driving your vehicle and all of a sudden there is a person who just enters your road or your way. What would be your reaction? You will get down your vehicle or you get down your bike, you start fighting. The very next second, you will have your hand in his collar, or you might have manhandled. So this is the scenario, this is the picture, this how calm are drivers in Brazil. And traffic in the Avenida Presidente. So this is a place, the Avenida Presidente and Copacabana. These two places in Brazil. And he says, George Mike says, in the Avenida Presidente Vargas, the scenario, the people are too horrible. You could bear to some extent in Copacabana, but in the Avenida Presidente Vargas, people and traffic is so horrible. You have no idea how long it took for George Mikes to cross the road just from one end to the other end. Or let's say how long it took for George Mikes to cross over the road in the busy traffic. He stands there in the zebra cross and he wonders, how could the crawling traffic get so busy that I need to wait for an auspicious time to cross over the road? Because traffic in Brazil is not slow. It's not like India, it's not like any other nation. In India, if you're in traffic, crossing road has no limits. A pedestrian can cross anywhere. But in foreign countries, they maintain uniformity. I'm not saying that our people are bad and their people are good. It's just that the people behavior. This is a piece of information written by George Mikes, and he is giving a piece of information to the readers. How different are people going to be as you move from country to country? In Brazil, author has to wait for too long. It could be a day. That's how he expresses himself. He is saying he has to wait for an auspicious time, not just an ordinary time. And this word has so much of inner meaning in it. Why he says an auspicious time? Because remember, in Brazil, drivers aim at a pedestrian. So George Mikes is afraid. What if any of the drivers aims at me. What if they aim at me? I will be killed. So he has to wait for an auspicious time, and he's wondering how come the traffic is so fast. And he says, author faces a fascinating problem of crawling traffic. And next he says, he witnesses a scene of two friends. As he is standing to cross the road, he witnesses a scene there. This is very important, and this is very funny too. He says, I witnessed a scene standing on the streets of the Avenida Presidente Vargas. One fellow or one driver across the street, the other side of the street, observes his friend, identifies him, waves at him, and yells at his friend as though he could be heard to him, and says, how on earth did you get over to that side? Listen to it carefully. One fellow who is on the other side, the driver waves at his friend who is on the other side and asks, how on earth did you get over that side? Is it giving something more? Is this line telling something more about the Brazilian traffic? Yes, it is. So that's how intensified, that's how crowded the traffic is. And what is the reply from his friend now? He has questioned, how could you get over or get on to that side? And from that side, the other friend, right? From this side, now from this side to that side, his friend replies, how? I was born here. He says, how? I was born here. Seems funny. His question was, how did you get over to that side? And the other fellow replies, how? Because I was born here. Which means that he never crossed over to that stage or to that side. That's how thick the traffic is in Brazil. So with this, George Mikes winds up his two small pieces which are taken from his major writings, The Land of Rising Yen and How to Tango. So this entire chapter is an excerpt. If you don't know what is an excerpt, it is just a piece of information taken from a book, right? So this entire chapter is an excerpt written by George Mikes. Thank you. That's it for today. Let's meet in the next session. And in the next session, I'll be dealing with, I believe that books will never disappear. Thank you. Have a good day.